A graveyard, the final resting place for most of us. Morbid and yet beautiful at the same time, graveyards represent the one place on earth where the living meet the dead, where the past meets the present. Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, spent many hours in graveyards. She enjoyed sitting by the grave of her mother, who died shortly after she was born. There she would sit and read and write and relax. She even proclaimed her love to her future husband in a graveyard like this. In her novel, Dr. Frankenstein pieces together his monster from limbs and organs stolen from corpses in a graveyard. Mary Shelley is one of the more prominent figures in Gothic Romanticism, and that genre of music, literature, and art has spawned some of the more memorable images in Western culture. From Shelley's Frankenstein to Poe's Raven to Bram Stoker's Dracula, these images are embedded deep within our history. But what about now? There are a group of people who label themselves or are labeled by others as goth. Is there any relation? Is modern goth more than just dark music and people dressed in black? I was determined to find out. Modern goth began in the late 70s, and one song was destined to fuel it. The song was Bela Lugosi's Dead. The band was Bauhaus. The music was dark. The lyrics conjured images of the undead. Bela Lugosi's dead. Other bands emerged at the same time. Susie and the Banshees released The Scream in 1978. Susie's dark style of dress became copied in nightclubs all over England and the United States. The Cure released Boys Don't Cry in the same year. Although they never considered themselves goth, frontman Robert Smith provided a lasting goth look, and The Cure would become one of the more successful bands in history. Although they didn't look goth, Joy Division sounded goth. Lead singer Ian Curtis provided melancholy lyrics that reflected his troubled life. Joy Division's manager described the band's music as dancing music with gothic overtones. The name stuck. Ian Curtis committed suicide in 1980. Goth had its first casualty. Other bands, whether intended or not, became part of a growing subculture. The subculture that grew around the music had a particular look. Black, and lots of it. By the end of the 80s, it seemed that the goth scene was beginning to fade. The Cure had turned more mainstream, and soon the music would be overshadowed by a growing trend out of Seattle. Grunge. Bands such as Nirvana and Pearl Jam led the way in the grunge takeover of mainstream music. Goth sat on the sidelines. But movies such as The Crow carried on Gothic themes and attitudes. Then came Columbine. Goth was blamed. Even though Harris and Klebold were not goth, many saw danger in the dark nature of goth music and subculture. Goth was misunderstood. Today, goth remains mainly underground, but it is still very much alive. It has even spawned other types of music, dark wave, industrial, and death metal to name a few. And occasionally, bands such as Evanescence break out into the mainstream. And now, things have come full circle. The Cure released their 13th studio album in 2008. Although goth as a style has broken up into many parts, there are still bands carrying on the Gothic traditions. But I wanted to find out more. Other than a name, does goth culture owe anything to Mary Shelley and the Gothic Romantic movement? To find out, I went searching for goth. At the Dark Fantasy Gathering, I listened to goth music and talked to people who considered themselves goth.
Goth to me is a variety of many things. It's dark elegance. It's tying together the architecture as well as the fashion, the clothes, the sentiment. Goths are very sentimental people. They pay attention to the stories of the past, going back to the roots and learning where it all came from, where the influences were, how it all started.
People are very morbid in nature. I mean, you look at news, it's all about death and depression and despair. Goths just pretty much bring it out as just another emotion rather than a normal person would hide it and, put it away like that.
I surprisingly found out that I was a goth from when my girlfriend died. Everybody's like, oh, well, you're being all depressive and morbid or whatever. My girlfriend died. That's called nature. But I wear black, so therefore, because I'm depressed sometimes and all that, and I'm a little bit unstable.
Well, it just pretty much means expression. It's how you want to express yourself. I mean, for some people, this is very empowering because they can't be themselves around their normal people, so they come to these things, and this is goth to them.
Goth to me is basically a community of people who embrace the darker aspects of life, but embrace them as a celebration of the life they live, that it's a belief that it could end at any minute, so we should live embracing that as opposed to being afraid of it.
Well, when I was little, I was always interested in odd, morbid things, like to go to cemeteries and things like that, and I kind of kept it, I'm from a rural area, so that kind of thing doesn't fly for a while, and, I got older, and I decided, I guess I found myself, and this is what I'm more like. I'm going to be me, and I feel more comfortable than trying to be somebody else.
It's conforming through nonconformity.
Okay, explain that.
It is a subculture that embraces you for being different. Whatever your difference may be, if you put on your black clothes and go hang out with them, you're welcome.
Now, you don't have to be wearing black clothes though to be a goth. No. So, essentially, what do you need?
You need to know who you are and to be comfortable with it and not care that these people over here are judging themselves by this standard and these people over here are judging themselves by this standard. There's a wonderful bumper sticker. It says, you laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at you because you're all the same. Yeah, they're all wearing creations by me, which is, I recently discovered I had a talent for sewing. These are all my corsets and waist cinchers. It's a form of temporary body modification.
In my search for goth, I found another resource, the Gothic Council of Chicago. This organization was having a meeting at Club Neo, and I was invited to come. I'm here with Slash from the Gothic Council of Chicago. What does your organization do?
We are specifically designed to kind of bring together the quote-unquote dark alternative community, which encompasses Gothic, industrial, electro, EBM, fetish, GLBT kind of segmented populations. People who are interested in the kind of music that we're into, and that kind of segues into a lifestyle.
Now, how many members do you have?
Our current core membership is about 500.
You know, it's a bit of the dark side, and I guess some people have said that, you know, part of goth is like, it's like accepting death, and that we're, you know, trying to show in our own ways that we're not afraid of it, and it doesn't make us nervous, because there's no reason to be scared of it. Sometimes cultures like to try and move it aside, and, you know, American culture is like that. It's not really as up in your face, and it's not a celebrated thing.
Well, Gothic comes from the Romantic period of literature. That's what it means. It's basically a romantic form of art, writing, or in architecture, or in any other form of art. That's what it means. Now, if you're talking about the pasty-faced people who need to eat sandwiches and probably, you know, get some sun, that's a different story altogether.
Yeah. So for you, where do you draw your inspiration then from that era?
Well, if I'm going to draw from that era, I will draw from Poe. He was a Gothic writer. Read The Fall of the House of Usher. That is a completely Gothic story. If you're going to read anything Gothic, that's it.
And what's Gothic about it?
Everything. It's the way the descriptions are. It's how he describes. It builds a mood. From the very first lines to the end, he set out to create a mood. And Gothic kind of wants to do that. It wants to set a mood for you. He uses words like dank, deep, dark, tarn to describe the moat around the castle. That creates a feeling of sinking miasma. And that's not what Gothic is all about, being depressed all the time, but it's about emotion, deep feelings and deep emotions.
It has to do, well, you want to understand goth, you want to look at the poetry of Byron. She walks in beauty like the night, of cloudless climes and starry skies. All that is best, dark and bright, meet in her aspect and her eyes. Things like that. Byron wrote a poem about drinking wine out of a dead man's skull, okay? That's a very strange thing to do. What goth is about, there is so much beauty in the night. There is so much beauty in darkness, just like there is so much darkness in what is beautiful. Gothic celebrates the things like was talked about by William Butler Yeats in his poem, The Second Coming, which I haven't got memorized. You should go read it. In the night, in the darkness, in what is the underside of life, there is such beauty, okay? There is such freedom, okay? We who take part in a Gothic lifestyle reject what is normal, reject what is conventional, reject my aunts and my grandmother are always telling me to just get a good job with a corporation. I reject that, and I'm going to be a massage therapist, and I'm going to be an actress and a writer and take my life in the road less traveled by. Okay, that's what Gothic is about. It has its roots in the lost generation of Henry Miller and Anna East Nin. It has its roots in Byron and Shelley. It actually goes all the way back to Gothic architecture. Gothic architecture was, we don't want to build it like that. We don't want to build an arch that just goes that way. We want it to go much higher. We don't like churches that are filled with darkness. We like churches filled with light. We like these beautiful stained glass windows. Goth, all the way back to the very, very beginning, is all about doing things differently.
What should they be reading? If they really wanted to get into goth culture, what should they be reading?
What should they be reading? They should be reading Byron and Shelley. They should be reading Henry Miller and Anna East Nin. They should be reading, you know what? Anything that you are told not to read, you should read, because that's what being goth is all about.
One thing I learned tonight: many Goths draw inspiration from a past history. A history that includes Mary Shelley and the Gothic Romantic movement.
Tonight.
Ghosts are real.
As you could see, the Gothic has a long tradition in our culture. Modern Goths, whether they know it or not, and many do, are a part of that long tradition. They celebrate that tradition in the way they dress and in the music they listen to. And every time we read a ghost story or watch a horror movie, we are drawing on elements of the past. We, too, are celebrating the Gothic. Maybe Mary Shelley and her world are not too far removed from our own. Perhaps, in the end, there's a little goth in all of us.
But if we were going musically, it would be the late 70s, what they call the Fabulous Four. You have your Bauhaus, you have The Cure, you have Joy Division, and you have Susie and the Banshees, and Sisters of Mercy's right
Goths
there.
are normally highly intelligent, and only the main thing is creative and all that, so naturally they don't fit into normal molds. This kid comes up to me and goes, "Are you a vampire?" I don't know how to answer this to this kid. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so the sun's up, so he's obviously illiterate and stupid. But, it's like, no, I'm not a vampire.
Are you sure? If you wear black or you wear high shoes or different makeup, doesn't mean you're like anti-God and anti-this and anti-that. People should just stop assuming things until they actually sit down and talk to you for at least 15 minutes.
As diverse as this group is, if you walk through and ask anybody here, in some way, shape, or form, they're an artist. Whether they're a dancer or a writer or an actor, whether they are a tailor, they are very good at expressing themselves in some way.
I've kind of always had a connection to things that are dark. I've always liked the music. I think much of the culture is really about the music, and I think that's where it started, definitely.
Okay, it doesn't matter what you wear, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as it is true to you. If what is true to you is working a corporate job, then that is goth, okay? If what is true to you is joining the military, that is also goth. If it is true to you, okay, as opposed to what everybody else says that you're supposed to do.
Every one of them is attached to something, but it's primarily that older feeling. As some other people, I'm sure, have said to you already tonight, like they'll read like Frankenstein or some of those literary works or Hawthorne, and cling to that type of.
To goth music, read something that's goth. What am I looking at?
Frankenstein.
You don't have to just say that.
I know, but I mean it. That's one of my favorites.